Hi, can you hear me well?
I can hear you. Yep, I'm well.
Thank you very much. Just wondering if you can please share some wisdom about how to navigate the negativity in mind all the time, even with the success or failure. Just it's coming all the negative thoughts around you. It's like a spiral. Just to sort of advice you can give me.
Right. I think that's a question many people will be interested in. I think you answered it a little bit in the question. You said, how it spirals out. When we're
Yep.
not particularly aware of ourselves, we tend to get lost in our negative thoughts, partly out of habit. The pressure of having thought something before, you tend to think it again. So it's habit. You might call it a bad mental habit. So we need to develop maybe the opposite as much as we can to bring up more mindfulness. Come back to some of the basic techniques like the breath meditation or any other meditation technique that helps you to be more self-aware. So first of all, you can see the negative thoughts as they're coming up. You may not be able to stop them yet. They're coming up through their own power from karma that you've thought in that way. You're reacting to things from before. But at least once you start to see yourself in the moment, oh, I'm getting caught into this negative way of thinking again, then wisdom comes from there, doesn't it? When you start to notice the suffering of negative thoughts, by observing, becoming more mindful, you see that. You say, oh, I'm suffering when I think in this way. Does it lead on to anything useful? No, it doesn't. It leads on to more unhappiness in myself, and often it leads on to maybe unskillful behavior in the way I speak, relate to other people as well. It doesn't help me. It doesn't lead on to anything good. So as you establish more mindfulness, even short bursts of mindfulness, for a few moments, you start to see yourself more clearly, and that gives you the wisdom to start letting go. You say, oh, don't feed it. Ajahn Chah used to say with craving, all kinds of craving, whether it's desire for things, greed, or desire against things, aversion, you have to stop feeding it like a cat, stray cat. So if your stray cat keeps coming round to your house, say your kitchen, and you feed it, well, it'll keep returning and it'll move in. And I can speak from experience because when I was a layman, this happened to me. You keep feeding animals, they'll move in with you. Craving is like that. If you keep feeding it, keep supporting it, indulging it, following it, letting it sit in your mind, so letting those negative thoughts sit in your mind and indulging them, they'll keep coming back and they'll become part of you, part of your personality. And we may even, sometimes we defend it. We say, oh, I'm always getting angry. I'm the angry one. Or I'm the negative one. To the point where we just accept it as, just part of who we are or part of our life. Sometimes it's like that, but you don't have to. Mindfulness is a very purifying practice. It may take time and effort, of course, but as you establish more mindful awareness in the present moment, you may sooner or later get a glimpse of an alternative reality where negative thought arises, but you let it go. You don't have to hold on to it and identify with it. You can know it, say, no, I'm not following this, I'm not going to keep with this. And then you may also introduce something that's not negative, bring in the opposite, so something based more in kindness and compassion, change some of the ways you think, change some of the actions and the behavior you're engaged in, do things slightly differently. That will come as you establish more awareness and investigate your own negative states of mind.
Thank you, Longpo. Anyone else who's got a question, a burning question? Or anything at all that you want to clarify about your practice? Don't be shy. There was a question here. The question is, dear Ajahn Kalyano, how did you deal with losing Ajahn Chah when he passed away?
Is there another bit to that question?
The bit to the question is, I know you are a very, very diligent, dedicated, and devoted disciple of his. With my utmost respect. Sorry, I reluctantly had to leave Zoom early. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, well, as a monk, from day one, you're constantly surrounded by this teaching of impermanence, and that includes life and death, always reflecting on that, whether in chanting or hearing Dhamma talks, or just, we attend funerals and visit the sick, and you're kind of surrounded by impermanence and the reflection on impermanence. So that perception becomes very clear. And when I first encountered Ajahn Chah, he was already about 60, over 60 years old, and already ill. So obviously everyone knew he would die at some point, and I think most people were surprised he lived as long as he did. Having said that, probably the same with any elderly relative you might have, someone you love or identify with who's sick, even though you know they're going to die because they're ill, they're old, maybe. In that, obviously it's different in the case of a young person who dies in a sort of unexpected death. But if it's somebody older who's sick, you know they're going to die. So you sort of have time to mentally prepare for that and think about it, which helps. But at the same time, when the moment actually comes, it's still quite an emotional pull on you, because a teacher is like a parent, and you develop a very strong relationship with your teacher like a parent. And of course, moment to moment, you may not always be thinking of your teacher, or sometimes you may even get irritated with your teacher like you get irritated with parents, because if you're an unenlightened person, that happens, let's be honest. But Ajahn Chah was very sick, so I didn't really get irritated with him. But there's days when you're more in a better state of mind than others, perhaps. So when the final loss comes, when he finally dies, it still has an emotional tug on you, and that's quite powerful. I actually, strangely enough, had a deep vision of him passing away a couple of weeks before he died. Maybe that's just through my connection with him and through my meditation. So I was, a couple of weeks before Ajahn Chah died, I was in Ajahn Buddhadasa's monastery, visiting there with Lumpur Samedo and a few other monks. And I was walking meditation up and down at night. In the day we talked to Ajahn Buddhadasa, heard teachings, but at night I was at my kuti and I was walking meditation up and down. And suddenly I had this deep awareness that Ajahn Chah would be dying very soon. And it was like somebody, what could you say, when you pull the plug out of a bath and all the water rushes away with a gurgle. It's kind of like that. It's like all the energy out of my heart rushed away. I actually fell to the ground. I was so weakened by that because it all happened in a few seconds. All my mental energy just disappeared. And I just collapsed to the ground because I couldn't stand. I wasn't strong enough to stand. Tears did form in my eyes, but I didn't, wail and sob. I did have tears forming in my eyes, but I knew, Ajahn Chah's going to die soon. This is the time. It's going to be soon. And I just reflected. Well, that's how the closeness, the attachment. You could say an attachment to the teacher is like that. There's a strong emotional attachment. So when the teacher goes, that's like it pulls that with you. So I was reflecting on it, observing that at that time as I was meditating. So when he actually died 2 weeks later, I was ready for it. It wasn't a surprise, and it was like I'd already had a few weeks of grief. So when the real moment happened, the actual moment happened, it didn't overwhelm me so much. That happened 2 weeks before. And I was actually, when he died, I was actually in the forest again. Ajahn Sumedho was there teaching a retreat with the monks from Wat Nanachat. And I had been looking after Ajahn Chah previously, but then I went to join this retreat. And I was camping in the forest in this monastery, which is an island monastery, about 75 kilometers away from Ajahn Chah's monastery. So a very beautiful big forest. We were meditating, doing a retreat. The night he passed away, his last night, we knew he was very ill, we knew he had gone into the hospital. So I meditated the whole night. I was actually sitting next to a skeleton. Somebody had brought a dead corpse and left it in the forest in a shallow grave for monks to contemplate. So I was camped next to that. The night Ajahn Chah died, I was meditating next to a corpse. And in the morning, when I finished my meditation, I was collecting my stuff to go on alms round, which is what we do every morning at dawn. I had the thought, this is the day he's dying, because he died around 5:20 in the morning. I said, I better go out and check what's going on. In those days, there's no phone and there's no internet, so it was only guesswork. But I went out, and Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Puriso, the abbot, were there discussing whether they should go into Ubon or not to see Ajahn Chah, because they knew he was very ill. And I said, yeah, go. And I worked hard to convince them that they should go, because they were sort of weighing it out, because there was no information. And we had a car available. So I said, yeah, go, we got to go. And so we all went, 3 of us and a driver went into Ubon and arrived about an hour after Ajahn Chah passed away. So on the day he died, I was actually more kind of together, and because there's a lot that we started to have to do when he died. I had my kind of emotional upset 2 weeks before, and that's happened with a few other teachers as well. Don't know why, maybe it's just me, I don't know, but that's how it is for me. I seem to get my grief over and done with before they die, and then they die.
Thank you, Nam Paul. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences. I think we all also have that with people that we're close to, that we'll have an emotional and spiritual connection with. So there are a couple of people here who like to ask a question directly.
Hi, hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes. I can hear you, hello.
Hello, Paul, so nice to sort of communicate with you. Thank you for sharing the Dhamma talk and also your experiences. The question I have is, so practicing here alone without a community, it sometimes can start to feel kind of dry. And I'm going about with my daily practices, and it's starting to feel like I'm just checking off the boxes. So as I think the idea of practicing alone far away from a teacher it's something a lot of monks like yourself would have to go through. So at times like this, what is the right way to wisely reflect or counter?
Number one, Ajahn Chah would say, be patient with your situation, because that's the situation you're in. So if you're in that situation, just be patient with it, accept it, and try and make the best of it. So if you're in Singapore, well, maybe there are some fellow Dhamma practitioners around, Kalyana Mitta, or wherever you are. I'm not sure where you are at the moment, but wherever you are.
I'm in Perth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Find some fellow Dhamma practitioners if you can, and that's a start. And then, of course, online helps. And then just make some plans when you're free to go closer to Kalyanamitta teachers, even if it's only for retreats or short periods where you can interact with Kalyanamitta. But when you're on your own, you have to be very patient, and maybe you're right. You establish a routine, and ticking the boxes is not necessarily a bad thing if it means you're doing certain skillful things like meditation, offering the Dhamma, offering dana in any way. Like nowadays you can offer dana from a distance sometimes, doing different kinds of dana activities or volunteering or whatever. Meditating every day, and even if you're with a teacher, you meditate every day. It's not always wow. Sometimes you have struggles. Sometimes you're bored. Sometimes you're fed up. Sometimes you have pain. Sometimes stuff comes up internally that makes it difficult. It's not like you always have really amazing, peaceful meditations with deep insights, even if you're living in a monastery or with a teacher, say. You go through a lot of the same things because you are you. Whether you are at home or you're with a teacher, it doesn't change who you are. So you make the best of your opportunities wherever you are. And if some days it seems a bit dry and flat, well, as Ajahn Chah said, that's a plain rice day, where you meditate and not much joy, not much insight, going through the motions. That's like a day you just eat some plain rice, and then once in a while you get a bit of a boost to your practice, seem to have some extra energy, have some insight, your mind settles down and everything falls into place, and that's the day you get your treat, you get your curry or your dessert, whatever it is. I think really wherever you are, you're going to have to deal with that dynamic. So, of course, Kalyanamitta are important, but also just having the discipline and the patience and endurance just to keep going wherever you are is a vital thing, I think.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Luang Por. Good to see
Hello.
you. My question is not exactly related to this evening's talk. It's on Metta Bhavana. I like the practice. I enjoy the practice of Metta Bhavana. And it occurred to me recently that with Metta Bhavana, we always start with self, and then after that, we move on to people who are our loved ones. That's normally the sequence. And I was just wondering, wouldn't that reinforce the self-cherishing? Now, when it comes to the loved ones, I find myself doing it more fervently when, say, my children are in some kind of trouble and I want them to get out of trouble. Now, again, that sounds like reinforcing that attachment. How do I reconcile that, Luang Por?
True. I mean, you pointed out some of the dangers of metta practice, but like you say, you have to contemplate to see these dangers. So one thing that will come up is because if we still have basic self-view and attachment, then as we practice metta, that will come up. So sometimes because of the self-view, we have the tendency to wish ourselves well to the point where you might say we spoil ourselves. And so we may have a bad habit that we've noticed, but because we're developing metta, we say, never mind. In the way we might find excuses for some things that we need to improve on or change maybe. That may be one disadvantage where we have self-view mixed with metta, and our metta is still not wise enough. So we're wishing ourselves well. Maybe you do something that's really wrong or harmful to another person, for example. But you say, oh, I should forgive myself. When you're feeling guilty or self-critical, oh, I should forgive myself. I should have more metta for myself. So you don't learn from the situation. You prolong it by keeping the bad habit because you've got too much metta, or your metta is not yet balanced by wisdom. So we need to contemplate as we practice metta. And that's why the Brahma Viharas really practice together when you get deeply into them. Metta is always backed by upekkha, equanimity. It's also backed with, or mixed with, supported by karuna, compassion. So say in the case I just said, say you notice some bad habit you've got, bad speech pattern or speech habit, or something you did that you're not very proud of, you realize was wrong. Your karuna says, I've got to change this, otherwise I'm going to keep doing it, I'm going to keep hurting myself, hurting others in some way. Upekkha says, yeah, and I have to be honest here. And metta may say, oh, I should maybe tell someone else this fault of mine, because often when we tell someone, if it's a trusted friend maybe, or a trusted teacher, sometimes you tell them, you become more mindful in the case of personal faults, say. So metta practice with wisdom may lead on to some skillful action, whereas if it's still just mixed with attachment and sort of what we call self-cherishing, we actually protect ourselves too much, or we try and hide our faults, or we don't want to open up to our faults or things that we need to change. And the same can be with others, like you say, when our kids or our loved ones are suffering. Of course, we have metta, and we want everyone else to have metta for them, and we want everything to come together to support them or help them through their crisis or their difficulty. But when our kids or our loved ones do something wrong, the danger of metta is you excuse it too easily. Maybe they behave badly, and that you don't want to tell them off or explain to them what they've done wrong or point it out. Because of the metta, we just, never mind. We can accept many faults and wrong things in our loved ones, because metta is, again, not backed by or supported by karuna and upekkha, equanimity. So we need to contemplate how to develop metta and what's really beneficial for me, really beneficial for others. Because you think about it, the Buddha's metta was teaching the path, the way out of suffering. So sometimes that does mean to reassure people, comfort people, make them feel relaxed, happy. Of course, there's that side to it. But at the same time, his metta may be pointing out where they've got wrong views, or where they're behaving badly, or where they're making a mistake. Like, you may wake up in the morning, metta should be saying, get up and do some meditation. But then another part of metta without the wisdom might be saying, I'm just tired, I need to lie here a bit longer. Well, you can do that every day until you die, but you're not going to see the Dhamma. So, metta has to be used with wisdom and guided by wisdom. So we need to contemplate as well. See where the dangers are, where sometimes it becomes a bias, so that you're always forgiving yourself and forgiving others for something that you should really change. You just forgive and carry on doing the same bad thing or make the same mistake. Sometimes we have to say, no, I'm not going to forgive, I'm going to really change for the better now. I've really got to do something about this. So metta can be, sometimes you make yourself doing something you don't want to do, or you make somebody you love do something they don't want to do. That can be metta as well. So, with a kid, your child, if they're young, they have to do homework, and they say, I want to play. And the metta says, let him play, or let her play, let her do her thing. But another part of metta with wisdom says, no, they need to do this work. I have to be firm. So sometimes metta has to be firm. Sometimes with ourselves, maybe we're eating too much of the wrong food and getting some health problems. So metta would say, don't eat that food. Whereas another voice in the mind is saying, I want that food, that's my favorite food, I like it. Metta has many sides to it when it's practiced with wisdom. So we also need to contemplate and reflect how to develop metta skillfully for the ending of our craving and attachment. That's the real purpose of metta.
Thank you, Lampo.
Yeah.
Greetings, Longport. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. I was thinking and reflecting while you were talking about scrolling, and I was curious. I was thinking about how sometimes when I go out to read news, sometimes I'm disappointed when there's no news, or in some occasions I'm pleased. Oh, there's a lot going on today in the world, or I'll come back later and see if anything else has happened. How can we be more skillful in how we read the news? How can we, instead of doing what I typically do and maybe other people do, how can we be more skillful and make it a more wholesome part of our practice? Thank you, Longpor.
Well, one thing you've kind of pointed out in your question, even news nowadays is a product that we consume, and the aim of people who produce news, whether it's online or not many newspapers anymore, but online, they're trying to sell their product. So make it tasty, make it enjoyable, make it interesting. So even news producers are trying to find new news that is stimulating. That's part of their job. If you talk to them, talk to journalists and people, that's what they're looking for, is the next bit of news. And like you say, it can be addictive. Even bad news and horrible news and sad news can be addictive because it's something that just grabs our attention. So in the long run, our aim is to balance that up a bit and find other things that are more fulfilling in our mind, that mean we don't have to seek out news in that way, just for stuff to stimulate us or seeking the attention or stimulate our attention. Try and find things that will fulfill us from the inside, from the point of view of Dhamma. So like somebody who comes to our monastery the other day, they were saying they did an experiment. They did a 7 days news fast. Mostly we say fasting is about food or something, but they did a 7 days news fast just to see what it's like, because they noticed the same thing. They're always addicted to finding out what the latest news is, what's the story, what's the details, and it's endless, like you say. So they cut it off for a week and they realized, you can stay fine without hearing the news, even when there's wars and problems and economic problems and crises everywhere. You don't hear the news for a week, you're still alive. Your life is still going on. It's not the end of your world. Things may be happening in other people's worlds, but your world is still much the same. And you can come back to the news, or you could do another 7 days maybe. This is what he found out. It really isn't that important to keep up with every little development and detail. And I guess that's what you're aiming for, is to be in that place where you have a choice, where, sure, sometimes it's useful to know the details of some news stories, just basic understanding of the world. But the majority of them are not that impacting on us at the moment, maybe. So, you don't really need to examine them in that detail, and not as often as we tend to do. But also to realize that, you can choose. And if you choose not to follow the news or read up on the news, that's fine as well. And practice of mindfulness, meditation, and then reflecting on things gives you some of that choice. It's the same with entertainments, the same with everything that we become addicted to and stimulated by. What you're aiming for is to have enough choice where you can see, well, is this useful for me, helpful to me, or not? And if it's not, well, okay, you can discard something, or at least temporarily discard it. Sometimes pick it up, sometimes put it down. But the idea is not to be a slave or addicted to things. That's your aim. When you're mindful, you're not addicted. When you're not mindful, you're just following habits, cravings, attachments, and that just leads to more delusion, more habits, more addiction, more attachment. which is not good, leads to more suffering. Mindfulness is going in the other way. You start to establish more mindfulness, then your reflective power improves. You feel like you've got more freedom to pick up the new story or put it down. At you have something higher there or better. So it's not really that news is good or bad. It's more you're gaining more control of your mind and more seeing what really supports your practice, and you might say your peace of mind as well. So some people decide I really don't need a lot of news because they find it very disturbing. Sometimes people get very worried, frightened by it, saddened by it. So you're getting more control of your life and seeing what really supports you, what you need and what you don't need, rather than just following habit and craving. Does that make sense?
Yes, Longport, thank you so much.
Right, thank you. And thank you, everyone. I think that's the time that we have for this evening. It's pretty late in Melbourne, in the monastery. And we shall now move on to the next segment, which we will share the Buddha's words on loving kindness, as well as the verses on sharing and aspiration. Could we please invite Long Pa to lead us in those reflections, the chants as well?
So the Buddha's words on loving kindness, do we recite this as a chant? A bit out of practice with your what you're doing on your Zoom sessions.
Yes, we would. You would chant it in English, and then we'll all follow.
Okay. Can I remember them? I think I can remember. So loving kindness first.
And then verses on sharing and aspiration. I'll put them up on screen, Long Pa.
Okay.
Are you able to see it?
I can see it. So I will chant as we do in the monastery here. Hopefully you can all follow along. Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease. Let none, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. by not holding to fixed views. The pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Next chant, next verse. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana. In every kind of birth, may I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.
Thank you so much, Long Po.